Hello and welcome to Study IQ. In this video, I will bring to you the banking awareness from the month of May 2017. Please note this is only the part first, and very soon, maybe by tomorrow, I'll bring you the second part for the same. This video will be immensely helpful to you in the SBI PO exam along with the RBI Grade B and UPSC exam. And two of our courses which are best selling right now, especially the RBI Grade B, we are receiving hundreds of queries for it every day along with IBPS PO. If you wish to avail any of these courses, you can dial any of the two numbers mentioned below. So my first piece of information today corresponds to Paytm Payments Bank. Now the first payment bank in India was the Airtel Payment Bank, which was opened last year in 2016, and the second one was the what you call India Post Payment Bank. And Airtel had resumed its payment bank. First state was the Rajasthan, where they had opened the first branch. And when it comes to India Post Payment Bank, they had opened their first two branches in Raipur and second in Ranchi. So Ranchi, as we all know, is the capital of Jharkhand, and Raipur we know is the capital of Chhattisgarh. These are the two places where India Post Payment Bank opened its branches in, and Airtel was the first bank. Now please note that a lot of banks have got the approval, in principle approval and licenses from the RBI that they can start their payments bank, but it is actually Airtel and India Post Payment Bank which have taken the step, which have actually put the plan into place, and they have actually resumed their operations. So if in the exam they ask you which was the first, the answer is Airtel, second was the India Post Payment Bank, and third is the Paytm Payments Bank. Now the difference between a normal bank and a payment bank is that payment bank cannot give loans to the customers. That is the most important difference. However, if the payment bank can team up with, or it can do a tie-up with, partner with other financial institution or banks, then it can give, but not on its own. It cannot give it. That is, the lending part is not possible here. Also, it's a new bank, just like a small finance bank. That is also a new type of bank which was envisaged by the Reserve Bank of India, for it started giving it licenses for the same in 2015. Now Paytm can accept customer deposit up to rupees 1 lakh per customer in a wallet. And now the difference is that, let's say you have a Paytm wallet, so you can use that Paytm wallet now as a bank. So it can issue debit card. Paytm will now be able to issue debit card just like any bank, mobile banking, online banking, and also saving and current account, both are possible. Previously there was no concept of saving or current account, and on your savings, in your savings account, you will get an interest also. That is 4% interest the Paytm is giving. So that is how they have upgraded now. Now also the thing is that Paytm, it is a fintech company. Fintech means financial technology, which combines finance and technology both. So when you have a finance technology company like Paytm, like MobiKwik, Oxygen, so what is happening with these companies is a lot of people are skeptical whether these companies will actually turn profitable, if at all. Like, if to give you an example of Paytm, it has received thousands of crores of funding, and its number one source of revenue, or so-called transactions right now, is their mobile recharge. So, but the thing is that most of these mobile recharge companies, they are opening their own payments bank. For example, Airtel has opened, and Vodafone is in the process. So very soon Vodafone will also open its payment bank. Reliance also will open its payment bank. Reliance also had just got permission from the Reserve Bank of India. So therefore, and also another thing is that most of these telecom companies, they are having their own app. For example, Vodafone has an app called My Vodafone. Airtel has an app called Airtel Money. So people will more and more use their own apps rather than the Paytm app, which people are using. So this business is definitely going to suffer. And the second most important source, or second most abundant source of transactions for Paytm right now is Ola and Uber. That is the taxi aggregator companies. But it will be very difficult to see. It is very difficult to envisage these companies becoming profitable in near future. And as such, Ola, for example, its CEO is Bhavish Agarwal, and Uber's CEO is Travis Kalanick. So Ola and Uber, Ola especially has raised funding, and now it is making heavy losses. So they have done away with the incentives that used to give to the drivers. So drivers went on a strike because earlier, if you recall, there was a Ola boom in 2015 and earlier part of 2016, where the various professions like engineers, they used to give up their jobs and drive taxis because they were making good profits, around 50,000 a month. That was only because of the incentives. But now Ola and Uber both have stopped giving those incentives, and therefore it is very difficult to see whether these companies will actually survive or not. And the third most important part is the e-commerce business. For example, you can open a Paytm website and you can do the e-commerce transaction. But again, e-commerce in itself is a very loss-making proposition, because these companies, they have a huge customer acquisition cost, and therefore they are making losses just to acquire customers, and they are not actually profitable. So all the businesses are running in loss in when it comes to Paytm, and therefore all the fintech companies, experts are saying that it is very difficult for them to become profitable. So Paytm Payments Bank is also a loss-making proposition to start off with only, because it is giving a lot of liberal subsidies to customers. Now let me give you an example. If you deposit 25,000 rupees in Paytm Payment Bank, you get a cashback of 250 rupees. It has become the first bank in India to offer a cashback on deposits. So this 250 rupees is like your interest that you have earned to start off with. So this is a loss for the bank, because on these 25,000, it is giving you a 250 cashback. So it is a loss. So can you imagine if 1 crore people open their account in Paytm Payment Bank, what will be the losses? Similarly, it has zero charges on all the online transactions and no minimum balance requirement also. Now there is only one more type of account which has no minimum balance requirement, which is, for example, your Jan Dhan account. You can open your Jan Dhan account with zero balance. There is no minimum balance requirement. And also it is not charging on any of the online transaction. So how it will make revenue? For example, on IMPS, NEFT, RTGS, it is not charging anything. This is just a way to acquire customer, to allure customer. On IMPS, in NEFT, RTGS, it is not charging a penny. Also, among the payment bank license holder, two entities have only started operation so far. I told you, Airtel and India Post Payment Bank. India Post Payment Bank is 100% acquired, 100% owned by the government, India Post, and Airtel Payment Bank is a private payment bank owned by Bharti Airtel. Please note that if they ask in exam which is the first public sector payment bank, the answer is India Post. If they ask which is the first private sector, the answer is Airtel Payment Bank. And if they ask which is the overall first, then the answer is Airtel. And Airtel started in Rajasthan. Now Airtel is giving good interest on a savings account compared to Paytm Payment Bank. Airtel is giving 7.25% interest. That is the maximum that you can get on your savings account. India Post Payment Bank, it has many slabs, but the maximum that you can get is 5.5%. And Paytm Payment Bank has started with 4%. Now Paytm Payment Bank, its parent company is 197 Communication. Paytm, its parent company is 197 Communication. What is the meaning of a parent company? Let me give you an example of Tata. The Tata, the main company, the parent company is Tata Sons, but it has many companies like Tata Steel, Tata Motors. So if I ask you Tata Steel's parent company, the answer is Tata Sons. So that is what you mean by the parent company. So 197 Communication may have in future a lot of companies, and one of them is the Paytm Payment Bank. And 197 Communication, it owns 49% stake in Paytm Payment Bank, and the rest 51 is owned directly by the chairman Vijay Shekhar Sharma, who is also the founder of the Paytm. And it will be headquartered in Noida, and Vijay Shekhar Sharma will be the chairman. Now, to give you some historical perspective here, in August 2015, there were 11 banks which had gotten the in-principle approval from the Reserve Bank of India. Please note, in-principle approval is different from a final license. In-principle approval is a preliminary thing, and later on you get the license to operate. So in-principle approval was given to 11 banks, and 3 banks had opted out. Tech Mahindra, Cholamandalam, and there was a consortium of 3 banks. That is 3 people, Dilip Sanghvi, IDFC and Telenor. They started together. They represented as a single entity. So Tech Mahindra was first, Cholamandalam was second, and Dilip Sanghvi, IDFC and Telenor. Dilip Sanghvi is the CEO of Sun Pharma. These were the 3 who had opted out. So total remained 8. And earlier this year, in April 2017, Aditya Birla also got approval from the Reserve Bank of India to open Payments Bank. And Aditya Birla is partnering with Idea Cellular to open the payment bank, and that payment bank will be called Aditya Birla Idea Payment Bank. So it will be a 51-49 venture. 51% will be owned by Aditya Birla Group, and 49% will be owned by the telecom company Idea Cellular. And Aditya Birla Idea Payment Bank, it was the 7th company to receive a final license from the Reserve Bank of India to set up a payment bank. This was as per the stock exchange notification that I referred to. It was the 7th company, please note that, and it was just last month in April 2017. And most of these companies have got the final approval except Vodafone. In fact, Vodafone will also get it by the end of this month, or maximum by first week of June. And in March last week, that is March 2017 last week, 2 companies were granted final license to start the payment bank by RBI. That is, one is the Fino Paytech Limited, and second is the National Securities Depository Limited. Both of these companies got the license. So remember that three companies got the license to start payment bank by RBI this year. One was Aditya Birla Group, and Aditya Birla is doing it with Idea Cellular. Second is the FinoPayTech, and third is the National Securities Depository Limited. Total 7 companies have got the final license from the Reserve Bank of India to start payment bank. Now Paytm Payment Bank will have 5 board of directors. So 5 board members will be there. One will be the chairman, of course, Vijay Shekhar Sharma. One will be the CEO. CEO will be Renu Satti. She will also be a board member, and 3 other board members they have recruited. So total there will be 5 board members. And what is their aim? Their aim is to become the preferred bank for 50 crore Indians by 2020. So after 3 years they want to have a 50 crore consumer base. That's probably over ambitious target. But as they say, if your targets are not too big, if your targets don't make people laugh, then your targets are too small. So it's a good target to have 50 crore Indians. They want to bank 50 crore Indians by 2020. And recently, Paytm has raised $1.4 billion, that is around 10,000 crore rupees, funding from SoftBank. SoftBank, its chairman is him. The photo you can see here, Masayoshi Son is the chairman. SoftBank is the Japanese telecom company. And if you remember, SoftBank CEO earlier was an Indian. SoftBank president was an Indian. His name was Nikesh Arora, but he was fired because of non-performance. And now the company is directly managed by the chairman Masayoshi Son. And as I said, Airtel is the first payment bank, first branch in Rajasthan, and India Post is the second. In fact, India Post started this year only, in January 2017. Now there are other companies also which are opening payment bank very soon. Reliance Industries, Idea Cellular. Idea Cellular is doing it with Aditya Birla Group, as we have seen. FinoPayTech, National Securities. You can expect their payments bank very, very soon. But so far, only 3 companies have opened. First Airtel, second was India Post Payment Bank, and third is the Paytm Payment Bank. Now let's come to IMF, International Monetary Fund. International Monetary Fund, it is one half of the Bretton Woods twins. And IMF and World Bank, they are called Bretton Woods twins. They are the twins. Now IMF is dominated by US and European Union. World Bank is also dominated by United States and European Union. Keep that in mind. I'll tell you why this is important. Because you will see that the IMF head is always either from United States of America or EU, and same with World Bank. World Bank's head is always from US or EU. Although right now it is Jim Yong Kim, but usually it is a US or EU guy. So IMF's the highest share in IMF and World Bank is of these two, USA and European Union. They call the shots. Now, International Monetary Fund has predicted the global economy would grow by 3.5% in this year, and last year it grew by 3.1%. So the year 2016, we had a global economic growth 3.1% as per IMF. This year 3.5%, and next year is going to be even better, 3.6% in 2018. And IMF managing director is from France. She is a lawyer, and she has been elected second time managing director of IMF. Her name is Christine Lagarde. She is a French lawyer, and she has been elected second time in a row. And IMF is headquartered at the same place where World Bank is headquartered at, that is Washington DC. Now let's take a look at IMF India. What is the relation between IMF and India? Why it has been in news? So IMF is saying that India is likely to overtake Germany to become the world's 4th largest economy in 2022. See, right now the world's number 1 economy is US, second is China, third is Japan, fourth is Germany. So they are saying India will leapfrog Germany, and India will become the 4th largest economy by 2022. This is what the IMF has said recently, in May only. And India will grow by 7.2% in the financial year 2018, that is from 1st of April 2017 to 31st March 2018, we will grow by 7.2%. This is also called financial year 2018. And next year, that is financial year 2019, from 1st April 2018 to 31st March 2019, we will grow by 7.7%. These are the IMF prediction for India. These are very, very updated. And growth in Asia, because of the 3 strong economies, Japan, China and US and India in Asia, growth in Asia is expected to accelerate. So last year in 2016 we had 5.3% growth, and in 2017 we will have 5.5% growth, and in 2015 also we had 5.3% growth. So in 2015 and 2016 we had 5.3% growth, and in 2017 we will have 5.5% growth. This is the forecast by the IMF for Asia. Now what is the IMF's advice to India? This will immensely help you in your descriptive writing and your interviews. This is what the advice IMF has given to India. First, sort out your stressed assets. you are piling stressed assets in the banking industry. Uh, Whenever a bank gives a loan to a party, it can be an individual or a company. If the bank senses, as a precautionary framework, it is always better to take precaution and to keep a close vigil on the people who have taken the loan. So there are early signs whether the person will return the money or not, and these can be called bad loans, or you can also call stressed asset. Stressed asset is basically when you sense that the loan is not going to come back, and if in 90 days neither the loan or any installment comes back, then it is called a non-performing asset. So we have to sort out our piling stressed asset in the banking industry. We have to overhaul our tax system, because right now the government is its only effort is to tax the middle class more and more. It has no plan whatsoever to include more people in the tax bracket. There has to be a framework by which more people can come into the tax bracket, and we must not tax middle class beyond a certain point. Then we also have to improve our productivity. It is lackluster right now. It is not up to the level. We also have to work on generating very good employment opportunities for people, because we are facing a huge joblessness these days. Government had promised to generate 2 crore jobs, 20 million jobs, but it has actually created only 1.5 lakh jobs. So there is a lot of joblessness, a lot of negativity, lot of saturnine mood in the people right now with respect to jobs. And India also need to encourage private sector investment, which is very, very poor in India. We only depend upon FDI, and we need to encourage private sector investment. Also, we need to try to overcome a significant infrastructure shortfall. We being a developing country, we are very short in infrastructure, especially digital infrastructure. So we need to upgrade that also. Now let's talk about Asian Development Bank. Asian Development Bank is dominated by Japan and US. It completed its 50 years recently, and Japan and US, they have almost same stake, 15.6% stake both of them have. So it is dominated by Japan mostly, and that is why the president is always a Japanese person. Right now, Asian Development Bank president is Mr. Takehiko Nakao, and he is from Japan. He is the president. The headquarters of Asian Development Bank is in Manila. It was opened in 1966. It completed its 50 years. In fact, its 50th annual meeting was this month only, from May 4th to May 7th, 2017, and it was in Japan, Yokohama. But Arun Jaitley did not attend. He said that there are more pressing issues which need his immediate undivided attention, so he did not attend the meeting. And there are 67 owners of Asian Development Bank. 67 owners means 67 countries have put their money in Asian Development Bank. It is a multilateral institution. India is Asian Development Bank's 4th largest shareholder. Keep that in mind. India is Asian Development Bank's 4th largest shareholder. And this is their forecast for India. So the year just ended, 7.1%. That is financial year 2017. That ended 31st March 2017. This current fiscal, we will grow by 7.4%, financial year 2018. And next fiscal 2019 financial year, we will grow by 7.6%. These are the forecasts of the Asian Development Bank. Now, it's also a good idea to know which bank is financing our which project. So Asian Development Bank, since we are friendly with Japan also and US also, both of these are our all-weather friends. So it is easy to get loans from ADB compared to AIIB or other banks. Now, Asian Development Bank has given loan for improving urban services delivery, like good health, water supply, sanitation in Madhya Pradesh. And for that, it has given a loan of $275 million. And Asian Development Bank has also approved $175 million loan to Power Grid Corporation of India for clean energy, especially for solar projects. And India is also a signatory to Paris COP21 conference. So we have to make sure that our greenhouse gas emissions and other emissions remain within check. So we have to keep a strong eye on that. Now, there will be 2 projects. One is the Bhadla Rajasthan Power Project. It is a big project, 2500 megawatt capacity power solar parks project in Bhadla, Rajasthan. And second is the 700 megawatt project, which is in Banaskantha in Gujarat. For both of these projects are being financed by the Asian Development Bank. Asian Development Bank is also financing $157.5 million for the Odisha Integrated Irrigated Agriculture and Water Management Investment Program. And for this, it has already sanctioned a loan of $120 million. See, whenever a multilateral bank gives loan, it may not give entire loan in one go. So 120 million it gave, and the remaining can be given in other tranche or other part. Now, ADB is also financing $500 million for Rajasthan Road project. Expected 2,000 kilometer road is to be built in Rajasthan. For that, ADB is providing $500 million of loan. And ADB is also financing other projects in India, like 390 million USD bond it is giving to support 709 megawatt of solar and wind project across 6 states in India. And it has also issued 300 crore rupees project offshore Indian rupee linked bonds for the project. Now, bond is a debt instrument. and keep that in mind. It is also a very good financing instrument, and basically the company sells its debt and it promises a fixed interest for the same. Now, one question that might intrigue you is that how these banks make money. ADB is giving so much loan, so of course it will charge India that money, and India can pay that over a period of time. Now let's come to IAMAI. It is the Internet and Mobile Association of India. Basically, Internet and Mobile Association of India is like a consortium of companies, and their job is only one, that is to have digital growth in India. So its chairman was Free Charge co-founder and chairman Kunal Shah, but he has been changed now. Its new chairman now is Mr. Anand Rajandan. He is Google India Managing Director and is also Vice President of Google Asia. So very esteemed and acknowledged personality all over India, and he will be the IAMAI chairman. His name is Rajan Anandan. Another thing, the vice chairman will be the CEO of MakeMyTrip.com, Mr. Deep Kalra. And there are more than 300 Indian overseas companies, in some are multinational companies, which are a member of the IAMAI. Now our public sector banks, they are not doing too well. In fact, our non-performing assets, they have doubled, and very soon they will be tripled. So there needs to be major restructuring, and this is basically a cosmetic exercise where you change one managing director and CEO to other banks managing director and CEO, and you do the switching. So the major restructuring took place in 7 of the banks. Now please note that our second largest bank in India, public sector bank, it is the Punjab National Bank. Punjab National Bank is the second largest public sector bank in India after SBI. Its chairman was the very powerful Usha Ananthasubramaniam, but now she has been shifted to Kolkata-based Allahabad Bank. Now she is the MD and CEO of Allahabad Bank. And head of Bank of India, Mr. Melvin Rago, has been moved to Syndicate Bank, Karnataka-based Syndicate Bank. He is now the MD and CEO of Syndicate Bank. And IDBI and Indian Bank, they did a swap. So IDBI Bank head was Mr. Kishore Kharat. He is now made the head of Indian Bank, and Indian Bank head Mr. Mahesh Kumar Jain is being made the head of IDBI Bank. IDBI Bank is one of the worst performing bank in India with a NPA, non-performing asset, of more than 15%. Now, who decides which bank's MD and CEO will be whom? It is decided by the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet, which is headed by the Prime Minister of India. So Appointments Committee is the committee that does all the appointments. And Union Bank of India, its new Managing Director and CEO for a period of 3 years is Mr. Rajkiran Rai Ji. Rajkiran Rai Ji is the Managing Director and CEO of Union Bank of India for a period of 3 years. Keep also that in mind. Another thing, Indian Overseas Bank, its Managing Director and CEO Mr. R. Subramaniam Kumar has been made, and Sunil Mehta will head Punjab National Bank in place of Usha Ananthasubramaniam, who has been shifted to Allahabad Bank. Then Managing Director and CEO of Bank of India will be Mr. Dinabandhu Mohapatra, and Managing Director and CEO of Vijaya Bank is R.A. Shankara Narayana. So these are the 7 changes that have been done. Very, very important. Now what about the non-performing assets in the bank? See, non-performing assets in the bank, they have doubled. Now very soon they will be tripled. So for example, at the end of March, that is at the end of March 2015, they were 5 lakh crores. Now see, March 2015 they were 2.67 lakh crore. They had doubled. By end of March 2016 they were more than 5 lakh crore. In fact 5.02 lakh crore. And if I say about the end of year, they had increased to 6 lakh crore. So by December end, 5 months back, December end of 2016, 6 lakh crore were the non-performing asset. And maximum non-performing assets are in this sector: power, steel, road infrastructure and textile sector. Power, steel, road infrastructure and textile sector. And you should know our minister also. Power minister is Piyush Goyal, steel minister is Chaudhary Birendra Singh, road infrastructure comes under Nitin Gadkari, and textile sector is Smriti Irani. So the companies which take loan from banks in this sector, they are the worst performing companies when it comes to returning the loan of the bank. So NPAs are getting accumulated and accumulated. And if I talk about latest, that is in May 2017, they have increased up to 8 lakh crore. Now let's talk about United Nations headquartered at New York. United Nations headquarters is in New York. Same place where you have the headquarters of UNICEF. Now according to UN, India is projected to achieve a 7.3% growth. It is also a very robust growth. It is not less. But earlier they had said we will grow by 7.7%. Now they have a more revised forecast, and they are saying India will achieve by 7.3% this year in 2017, and next year we will grow by 7.9%. This decrease in their forecast is because of demonetization, and this increase in their forecast is because of remonetization. Because after demonetization, when the money will flow into the system once again, then we will have a rebound growth. So in 2018, our GDP will grow by 7.9% as per the United Nations. Also, India's economy will grow better than China. So China's economy is slated to grow at 6.7% in 2017 and 2018 both. China's economy will grow at 6.5%. So India will remain the fastest developing economy in the world. Now the world gross product. World gross product is the GNP, the gross national product of all the countries put together in the world. So the world gross product is expected to expand by 2.7% in 2017 and 2.9% in 2018. Last year it was only 2.3%. So the world gross product is also slated to improve. In 2016 it was 2.3%, in 2017 it will be 2.7%, and in 2018 it will be 2.9% as per the United Nations. Now let's talk about IIP and WPI. IIP is the index of industrial production, and WPI is the wholesale price index. Now please note that we have revised our base year for the same, which is done for calculations. Earlier the base year was 2004-2005. Now the base year has been shifted to 2011-12. That is the financial year 2012 is the base year, and earlier it was financial year 2005. And our chief statistician is TCA Anand. Now because of this, all our projections, all of our everything will change. All of our inflation data, everything will change because of that. Now let's talk about an important report, which is the Global Financial Integrity Report. It is a private organization which has given some data about the 10 years in India from 2005 to 2014. This coincided with the UPA 1 and 2 rule in India. UPA 1 ruled from 2004 to 2009 and Congress 2 from 2009 to 2014, UPA 2. So illicit financial flows. First let's talk about the illicit means illegal black money that came in India. So India was third on the list. Maximum black money came in China, around $5.5 trillion, then Russia $1.7 trillion, and then India $770 billion. This is around 46 lakh crore rupees. 46 lakh crore rupees of India. 46 lakh crore came to India in 10 years during the Congress rule. India was third on the list. If I talk about the illegal money, black money that went out of India, it was around $165 billion. So between 2005 and 2014. Now in these 10 years, we did a total trade of $5,500, and around 3% was the black money that went out of India. So this shows there is a lot of black money. 3% if you are saying of our total trade is black money that went out of India, that's a thing to worry about. And why this black money is generated? Because of misinvoicing of exports and imports. I'll give an example. For example, if a company wants to import something, let's say it costs 1,000 crore now, and you have to pay, let's say, 20% import duty, then it will show this money less. It will say that I have imported only 500 crore worth, so that the import duty which they have to pay less. So because of under-reporting, under-invoicing and over-voicing by the exporter, usually the companies that export, they show inflated bill, and the companies that import, they show under-voicing. That is, they show money much less than what is there to protect that, to prevent them from paying taxes. And it shows that India's customs and all our Directorate of Revenue Intelligence and Enforcement Act, they've all failed to actually, remove the black money from the system and to prevent the inflow and outflow of black money. Now here's something interesting for you that I found out. Consumer inflation in India, let's see, during the Congress rule from 2005 to 2013. In 2005, inflation was 4.2%, just when Congress had started in 2004, taken over from BJP. In 2010, consumer inflation was 11.7%. That's a lot. And in 2013, it was 9.3%, still double of what it was in 2005. And this period coincided with the immense 46 lakh crore worth of black money coming into India. So can I say that there is a relation between black money coming in and inflation? That is for you to something to think about. Now let's talk about the time when Modi has taken over from May 2014. In 2014, our inflation is 5.86%. And in 2016, our inflation is 2.23%, lowest ever in the last maybe 10 years, 15 years. So, and can I say that during this time, although there is no data available as yet as to what is the illegal money that has gone in and out of India, but can I say that now the inflation is low, the black money that is coming into India is much less? Remains to be seen. Now, foreign exchange reserves, let's talk about that. Foreign exchange reserves, they include many things like foreign currency asset, which is basically the foreign money that is present in India, then gold assets, special drawing rights. This is a type of international money generated by IMF so that the companies can increase their foreign exchange fund. It basically is a weighted average of all the convertible currencies in the world. Then you have RBI's reserve position with the IMF. All four constitute foreign exchange reserve. And India has achieved lifetime high of almost $380 billion of reserve. So now you can imagine, even if recession comes, we are very buoyant. We have a buffer. Look at our buffer stock, $380 billion. That is why India's economy is considered very, very strong. Now, if you remember in 1991, we had gone bankrupt. Our gold assets had to be mortgaged. We had no foreign currency assets. That was the time when we resorted to liberalization and globalization. So Manmohan Singh was the genius who turned it around, and PV Narasimha Rao that time was the Prime Minister. Now let's talk about AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Now I told you that World Bank is dominated by European Union and America, right? IMF is dominated by European Union and America. ADB, Asian Development Bank, is dominated by Japan and United States of America. So where does China go? So in 2015 December, China opened their own bank called AIIB. It is again a multilateral bank. Many countries are a part of it, but it is dominated by China. Exactly what they wanted. So Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, it started functioning in January 2016. There are 53 members. A lot of companies want to be a member of this because China is China, second largest economy in the world, and headquartered at Beijing. President is Jin Liken. Now Jin Liken is the ex-finance minister of China, and he is the chairman or the president of AIIB. And India is the second largest shareholder in this bank after China. China has 26%, India has 8%. Russia is third, Germany is fourth. Russia has around 6%, Germany has around 4.5%. And AIIB has given loan for only one project so far. In fact, this was very latest on 3rd of May 2017. So they approved USD $160 million for a power project in Andhra Pradesh. The first credit from the AIIB bank for an Indian project. Now, interesting thing here is that I think it is political. Again, my personal opinion, because we had One Belt, One Road meeting. That is called the Belt and Road Forum meeting in China in the first week of May. So they approved it on 3rd of May. So maybe they were trying to lure India to attend this meeting, but India still boycotted it. All right, because India does not want to be, a victim of the string of pearl strategy. That is, China want to encircle India from all sides, and OBOR might be that. So and also there are sovereignty issues, like for example CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It is a part of One Belt, One Road, but CPEC passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is a sovereign territory of India. So again, India was very reluctant, and India, despite many requests from China, did not attend the meeting. Now our income tax department is called CBDT, Central Board of Direct Taxes. It is headed by Mr. Sushil Chandra right now. And our indirect taxes department is called CBEC. It has been renamed to CBIC. Central Board of Excise and Custom is our department for indirect taxes. It has been renamed to Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. So Operation Clean Money started by the Central Board of Direct Taxes. Income tax is a direct tax which we directly pay to government. And indirect tax is the one which we don't pay directly to the government. We pay to an intermediary who then gives it to the government, like a sales tax. So income tax department started this clean money thing in operation. This is basically that during demonetization period. So 8th of November, Modi announced demonetization. 9th November to 30th of December, anybody who made huge cash deposits and their accounts will be screened. There will be a database that will be prepared, and it will be correlated, cross-checked for any tax evasion. So if someone has given explanation of the source of cash, then no action will be taken, verification will be closed, and he need not visit the income tax office. But if someone is trying to hide money, then of course action will be taken. Also, they had started during demonetization period Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, which was a scheme basically to if a person has black money, he can still escape punishment if he donates to Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. If he invests, and for 3 years it will be the lock-in period, he will be given no interest, but he can still protect his money. It's basically if I talk loosely, it is basically a way to convert black money into white. So this you have to remember. If somebody donated cash to Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, then the verification will be closed. Now Reserve Bank of India is doing interesting things. For example, Reserve Bank of India has started a new position altogether called CFO, Chief Financial Officer, just like you have in companies, Chief Financial Officer. And for that, it has invited applications from chartered accountant across the country for the first time in its history. So CFO is the new position that has been started by Reserve Bank of India. Another thing, deputy governor, one of the deputy governors of RBI is SS Mundra. SS Mundra is retiring on 31st of July. So they want to replace him. But for that, they have invited applications this time for the first time ever. So for the first time ever, we can have a deputy governor who is not from a public sector. He can be from a private sector. Now, to give you some example of non-performing asset, Videocon industry, it is valued at 1,757 crore, but the debt is 47,000 crore. So even if you do the auction of this company, you will not be able to raise more than 2,000 or 3,000 crore. Where will this 47,000 crore come from? And you might ask why the bank gave so much loans when this company was not worth it. See, sometimes what happens is, that is where the concept of corruption comes in. The bank managers, there are a lot of criteria to give loans. Like for example, if a company does not have a very good collateral to pay, or collateral to keep with the bank, still bank can give loan if the company is profitable, it is showing good growth in the market, goodwill is. So these are all subjective factor, and that is what the bank managers, they take advantage of. They pass the loans, they take some money from the company, and that company is never able to return. Look at what happened to Vijay Mallya. The person who paid him heavy loans, the guy who gave him loans, he must have been the bank general manager or someone. He must have charged, I mean, plenty of money. And I was having a word with the general manager of State Bank of Patiala, and he was very honest about it. He said that a lot of corrupt managers is, they are responsible for non-performing asset. And he also told me another thing, that banks are not motivated to recover the loans because every manager has targets that you have to give this much loan every month. So his focus is more on giving loans rather than recovering. And also bank employees, they are usually overburdened with a lot of work. So their motivation to recover money is very, very less. That is why you have the concept of asset reconstruction companies, which I'll come to much later. Look at Reliance Communication. It is valued at 6,400 crore, but the debt is 42,800 crore. Look at Bhushan Steel, 1,838 crore, but debt of more than 46,000 crore. So non-performing assets are just piling up despite so many schemes by government. Government has tried everything. It has tried Indradhanush scheme, and Reserve Bank of India has tried S4A, SARFAESI Act. They made it more strict, but nothing is working. As long as corruption will stay, non-performing asset will stay. So Reserve Bank of India is taking the matter into its own hand, and Reserve Bank of India has been made more powerful. Now Reserve Bank of India, there is an oversight committee which looks in cases related to non-performing assets resolution, and they are increasing their number. So they will reconstitute the oversight committee, and the bad loans are now touching almost 8 lakh crore. So Reserve Bank of India will also expand the scope of the S4A scheme, and they will expand the scope of the cases to be referred to the oversight committee beyond those under S4A scheme, sustainable structuring of stressed asset. And RBI also wants the rating agencies to play a vital role in the resolution process. This was all announced by the RBI last week, but how they are going to do it, it will take some time for them to figure out. There is a Banking Regulation Amendment Ordinance 2017 that has been passed, and this gives RBI great powers. Like they can initiate the insolvency procedure in a company. They can ask banks for any information anytime. In fact, RBI has asked all the information about the stressed asset from all the banks. So, and the ordinance is basically, it was first approved by the cabinet, then it was signed by the president, because no ordinance can work without the signature of the president. And when we will have monsoon session in August, July, August, then it will have to undergo the same procedure for it to be called a law. So the ordinance, it gives a lot of powers to RBI. It authorizes the RBI to issue directions to any banking company or companies to initiate insolvency resolution process in respect to a default under the provisions of the Indian Banking Code. And it has also empowered the RBI to issue directions to bank for resolution of stressed asset. So this is basically RBI is becoming more strict with respect to non-performing assets. And immediately after the ordinance was issued, it was promulgated, the RBI issued a directive bringing changes to the existing regulation on dealing with the stressed asset. And this statement said that they will do the following: flexible restructuring, strategic debt restructuring, and S4A. Also, there will be changes made up in the Joint Lenders Forum. What is Joint Lenders Forum? Joint Lenders Forum is a new concept. Basically, what happens is, it takes some time for a loan to be converted to non-performing asset. We can identify the signs early. Like for example, if the checks are bounced, if a company is not able to submit its financial information, if there are a lot of bouncing of checks, not clearing of any drafts, these are all some signs of the stressed account. So that all is identified by the Joint Lenders Forum. Now, according to new rule, If an asset is to be subjected to corrective action plan, then 50% of the creditors in the joint lenders forum, they need to agree, or at least 60% of the asset by value. And these changes were made to facilitate the decision making process in the joint lenders forum, because a lot of times it was seen that joint lenders forum, it is slow, it backtracks on its decisions, and the people are not professional. There is a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tapes, and so on. So this is how it identifies the account which can become a non-performing asset. So there are three types of accounts. Special mention accounts, as they are called. Special mention account 0 means if nothing is returned, loan is taken but nothing is returned less than 30 days, but there are signs of incipient stress. SMA 1 is if a loan is overdue for more than 31 to 60 days, no installment is paid back. And SMA 2 is greater than 60 days but less than 90 days, because 90 days we call it a non-performing asset. Fitch, the credit rating agency. In fact, Fitch was pressurized by the Indian government. It was leaked by the company that Indian government tried to persuade Fitch to improve their rating, but they did not. They are honest credit rating company. Fitch, they in their latest rating review, they have given India's rating BBB minus, which is the lowest investment grade rating. And according to the Fitch, India's general government debt burden is 67.9% of the GDP. So you can imagine here what is government debt burden. 67.9% of our entire GDP. And there was a committee by the government on how to bring it down. So that committee was to review the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management FRBM Act. It has recommended that it should not be more than 60%. So that is what they are saying. They need to lower it by lower it below 60%. So 67.9 is the current. And also Fitch has said that our stressed asset right now are $150 billion. That is the money that that is a non-performing asset and plus stressed asset plus everything. So Fitch said that in banks we need to infuse $90 billion if we are to comply with the Basel III norms. Please note, Basel III norms require us to be compliant with the capital adequacy ratio and a lot of other ratios, and by 31st March 2019 we are compliant with Basel III norms, and for that we need to recapitalize our banks. But the recapitalization that was done by under the Indradhanush scheme and other recapitalization plans, the money was very less. So the money should be at least $90 billion, because there is $150 billion of stressed asset in the Indian economy. Another thing, Reserve Bank of India has said that the asset reconstruction company must have a minimum net owned fund of 100 crore by 2019. Now let me first tell you what is a asset reconstruction company. So let's say there is a bank, State Bank of India. It has given a 1000 crore loan to Study IQ. Okay, I know that they will never come, but just for an example. So State Bank of India has given a loan of 1000 crore to Study IQ. Now Study IQ, they have identified, is not responding very well. So this money can very well be turned into a non-performing asset. Let's say it has turned into a non-performing asset. For 90 days, I have not paid a penny. Neither installment nor any interest or nothing. So what will banks do? Bank employees are always overworked. The motivation of a bank to recover bad loans is very, very low, because the bank managers, they are paid employees, they are getting their fixed salary. Why will they recover the money for government? Who wants to work for the profit of the country? Everybody wants their own profit. So the motivation of banks is very, very low. So banks will lose this 1000 crore because I am not going to pay a penny. I will go out like Malia maybe. So what the bank will do, it will hire an asset reconstruction company. Asset reconstruction companies are the companies which tell to the bank that give this loan account to me. So the bank will say, okay, give us 700 crores and this guy is yours. So asset reconstruction company, its job will be to recover the money from Study IQ. So asset reconstruction company needs to pay 700 crore to the bank. Now you will say bank has made a loss of 300 crore, but well, something is better than nothing. 700 crore at least the bank is getting in return of 1000 crore. Otherwise it would not have got a penny, or it would have got very less. So asset reconstruction company, it buys the debt, it buys the non-performing asset account or stressed account from the bank. And then what this asset reconstruction company will do is that it will recover the money from Study IQ. So how it will do is, asset reconstruction company will come to Study IQ and say, you have to pay 1000 crore to us. Pay us 800 crore. We will do a one-time settlement. If you pay the money, we will waive off your 200 crore. So this 100 crore profit they will make. That is how asset reconstruction companies, they work. Now you might ask, why didn't then the SBI directly offer Study IQ this, that we will waive off 200 crore and give us 800 crore. Why this 100 crore loss also? That is because their motivation is low. Asset reconstruction company have many other mechanisms to recover the loans from the stressed accounts, but the motivation of banks is low. So keep that in mind, asset reconstruction company. Now one question that might intrigue you is, where this asset reconstruction company, there are 15 asset reconstruction company in India. Now where this asset reconstruction company got its 700 crore from initially? Who invested this 700 crore? So a lot of people invest. These are called qualified institutional buyers. These are big companies, they may be organizations which invest in ARC in form of, they basically buy securities. They might invest in mutual funds, in ULIPs, unit linked insurance products, or any other products. And people invest in mutual funds and these companies, ARCs. So the Reserve Bank of India has said that if you want to operate a ARC, then by 2019, your minimum net owned fund should be rupees 100 crore minimum. Okay, and they have made SARFAESI Act much more strict. No asset reconstruction company can commence or carry on the business without having a net owned fund of not less than 2 crore or such other higher amount as the RBI may specify. So right now, if you are running an asset reconstruction company, you cannot have a net owned fund of less than 2 crore, and by 2019 you cannot have it more than less than 100 crore. Also, another feature what they have done is, see, two sectors are really suffering in India. One is the real estate sector, nobody is buying property these days, and second is infrastructure sector, which is always suffering. So banks have been allowed by Reserve Bank of India to invest in real estate trust and the infrastructure investment trust, but only up to 20%. And this 20% is not exclusive to only these two trusts. This is cumulative. So for example, banks can invest up to 20%. This is the limit by RBI in these things like equity linked mutual fund, venture capital fund and stock, and in these two trusts which are mentioned here, like the real estate investment trust and infrastructure investment trust. This they have to do this from this 20% itself, but the number cannot exceed more than 20%, including all of these. So this is what has been done by RBI to promote these two sectors. So this was the part 1 of the video. I hope you liked the video and my explanation quality. I will very soon bring to you the part 2. So stay tuned.